right, you're listening to Hawk Talk. I'm here today with the Townsend brothers. How are you guys?
Doing great. Excited to be on. Yeah, it's been a while since we've talked. So excited to be able to
Yeah,
sit down with you.
yeah. A few things have happened, maybe a championship or so, and a couple nice little events.
Something like that.
But yeah, definitely good to see you. So to kick it off, I just assume you guys were born, first day when you're both in delivery, like they just handed you a football and that was it. You're off to the races, right? That's just how they produce in the Townsend family.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it works. You're born and they decide you're a kicker because that's pretty much the only way that people decide to become kickers if it's not by choice. We fell right into it in the funniest of ways.
Yeah, so tell me about it. Like, were your family athletes? Like, did you come from a dad that played, or where did it all start? What were they doing when you were little kids?
We grew up in a really competitive household. I mean, having all boys in general just made, even deciding what TV show to watch really competitive, which was, there was always an argument. But the dynamic around the whole family was really special because it started with our grandfather. We had a grandfather that played for the Boston Red Sox, and then he played for was the Wilkes-Barre Barons, which was the Brooklyn Nets before the Brooklyn Nets. So he was a really good athlete. And then we had uncles that went Division I. We had, Tommy, 10 cousins go Division I with scholarships on our mom's side.
Oh yeah, everything between soccer, volleyball, some cousins that played baseball, football, of course. So yeah, the list goes on. And also something that Johnny didn't mention about, our grandfather, Rocco English, he actually played for the U.S. Navy All-Star team in World War II. And yeah, so he was drafted to the Navy during World War II. And, he was fortunate enough to tour around the Pacific, and he was in Australia for most of the war playing baseball and entertaining troops. So he got to play with, some pretty big names there. But yeah, long story short, big family history. But yeah, some talk, speaking on the competitiveness thing that Johnny was saying also, I was telling somebody the story the other day about how, they used to dress me up in Johnny's catcher's gear and take me outside in the front yard and just beam baseballs at me,
And so you guys, how many siblings were there or are there?
There's 3 of us total. Yeah, the older brother got all the brains. He's an orthopedic surgeon at Temple Hospital in Philadelphia.
I love how that's still aligned, though. He's still very much in the sports where if you're an orthopedic surgeon, you're treating a lot of athletes anyway. So you're still in that.
A lot of people that have, family members, especially brothers, as surgeons, they might not trust him enough. But I trust Clay. I trust Clay. If I ever need to get work done in the future, I trust him.
That says a lot. Exactly. We always talk about, like, it's funny, as you guys know, I run a marketing company. My family will consistently call me about marketing questions on their business. We have never worked together because it's just like, let's not do that. Like, you almost know too much about your friends to actually, even though you want to give them business, you're like, yeah, but I remember that other time that you were beaming baseballs at me, or you got drunk, or you did this. I would know a little too much to want to have you work on me.
Exactly. Although he's a professional, it gets funny when you learn too much about him as a person. We've known him for a long time. So sometimes we're like, is he qualified to do? He'll call us and say, yeah, I did 2 hip replacements today, by lunch. And it's like, is our older brother really qualified for this? But it's funny. The running joke is that he's like the 3rd Manning brother. And he's the one that, coined this, because there's Cooper Manning. He's kind of forgotten. There's Peyton and Eli, and those are the 2, big football players. And then there's Cooper Manning. So Clay's Cooper Manning.
Nothing wrong with that, though. It sounds like he's doing well. And so, was your dad an athlete too? It sounds like your mom's side was very athletic. Was your dad the same way?
Yeah, our dad and our uncle were both very athletic. Unfortunately, our dad suffered a knee injury in high school and wasn't able to continue his career into college. But yeah, he was big into sports, growing up as well, and he was a great athlete. But unfortunately, the technology back then and the orthopedic surgeons back then weren't great, so he wasn't able to continue his career. So from then on, he just went to the University of Florida and went the law track, and he's been an attorney for last not sure how many years, long time. He's been doing it a long time, but he's good at it.
And so growing up, sounds like then you had the academic family and athletic family. So at what point were you like, we may actually be professional athletes? Because a lot of kids dream about that. You could be 5-6 years old and be like, I'm going to play in the NFL one day. Was like that you guys? Was it like from early memories you wanted to be professional athletes?
Yeah, I mean, that's always the goal. I feel like, as kids growing up, especially in a sports household, but you never really know if, it's going to come true or, come to the dreams are going to come to fruition. And that was a weird thing for me after the first Super Bowl is it took a really long time for, it to process and really settle in. And even so, playing in my first Super Bowl in 2020, that was a really difficult one to get my head around because, that was the COVID season, and it felt the complete opposite of, what I know a normal football season to be like, coming from playing at Florida and playing in front of 90, 100,000 people every single week, going to either a completely empty stadium or a half full stadium. That was just a really weird season and a weird welcome to the NFL.
What's the age difference between you two, by the way?
It's 2 years, little under 2 years. And same thing with our oldest brother, Clay. So, we're all super close in age, and that was something that was great growing up. We were able to be, competitive with each other, but also, just in family life, we were able to be super close and, grow up together and, have similar interests.
Johnny, where'd you go to college, by the way?
We both were University of Florida Gators.
You were Florida?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Awesome. Was that by design? You're like, we're sticking together, we're doing this, we're picking a school, we'll have it both? Like, how did that happen?
We both had pretty unconventional paths to the Gators. Mine was different as well. We both grew up huge Gator fans, right? Both of our parents went there, had an uncle that played there, extended family all went there. We grew up in Orlando too, which is right down the street. And we happened to grow up during the golden eras of Gator football. So it was like Tim Tebow, Brandon Spikes, Percy Harvin, winning all the championships. So when you mentioned earlier, did you always want to go to the NFL? The answer was no for me. It was just wanting to play for the Gators. Even some of our earliest memories of those stories of me throwing baseballs at Tommy and catching gear, we would also go out in the yard and change the initials of Gator football players to be ours. So like I would be Jim Gebo going out there throwing passes to Tercy Tarvin, and Clay was the linebacker, Clandon Clikes, and he'd just come in and kill us with big hits. And so that was kind of the goal, to be a Gator. But I actually committed to Ohio State my senior year of college, which felt like the Gators because Coach Urban Meyer had just got there. He took Mick Marotti, the strength coach, and essentially the Florida Gator ecosystem was in Columbus. And so they offered me a scholarship and spent my whole senior year committed to them before flipping on signing day. And
you flipped signing day. Like, how did that come up? If you were committed for a full year, what happened that made you flip?
Yeah, it didn't go over well with Coach Meyer, that's for sure. Oh my gosh, man.
It happens. Yeah.
So my whole senior season, I was committed to the Buckeyes. And I had an older brother that was at the University of Florida. And, I was so committed to the Buckeyes that I did not even go to a Gator game that whole my senior year, even to visit my brother. But yeah, when I decommitted on signing day, it was pretty funny. I had the goal of calling him to decommit, Coach Meyer. And he's like one of the most, famous recruiters naturally. And I call him to decommit. I have my parents with me. And at the end of the call, I hang up and I didn't commit. He talked me into staying, even though I had the goal of committing. So I hung up and looked at my parents and said, he talked me out of decommitting, and I had to call him right back. And as soon as I called him back, that's when he flipped the switch, and he was not happy.
Like some real fireworks, some anger, or was he just like disappointed?
There was some fireworks. It was the 4th of July in terms of fireworks. But yeah, I decommitted at probably 5 p.m. on signing day. So it was late in the signing period, and timing probably wasn't good for him. And so I totally understand it. So
yeah.
And on top of that, I went to the Gators, which is where he just left. So he wasn't happy with that either.
All right, Tommy, what was the story on your side?
Yeah, so Johnny flipping from Ohio State to Florida was a little bit of a bittersweet thing for me, actually, because, it was cool that he was going to be able to come back and play for Florida. But, typically how it works is when it comes to, punters and kickers in college is they scholarship one guy every 4 years. And, it was lining up so that a scholarship was going to be available at Florida for me to, my year coming out of high school. And, when Johnny flipped, that actually, kind of closed the door to Florida, because that meant that, Johnny was getting the scholarship after 2 years instead of, the 4-year period. So, that immediately, like I said, closed the door, and I had to make the decision, I got to go somewhere other than Florida. But, I wanted to stay in the SEC, and, I was fortunate enough to have an opportunity to go to Tennessee, and, a couple things panned out to where, I made the decision that, I needed to leave and, make a career decision. And, the path to Florida reopened back up. And, although it wasn't my dream to, to go and, sit, I wanted to come in and start as a freshman, like, just about everybody wants to do, coming into college. But it wasn't the worst thing for me. It was actually, probably the best thing that could have happened, was to come and sit behind Johnny for a couple years and, learn from him. And, both of us, work together. He would always drag me out of the house to go, catch jugs and do drops and all that stuff to, continue to, develop our skills as punters. But that was probably the best thing that could have happened to me was, deciding to, leave Tennessee and go to Florida.
I don't think it's unusual. Obviously, you got the Mannings, et cetera, like to play football as a family, but both to end up punters. Like, was it just like you guys, like, is it genetics? You guys have ridiculous legs and it's just part of it. And that's what you fell into, or what? Like, why punter over anything else? How did that happen?
I guess one of the biggest questions I get now is, like, oh, were you a soccer player? Like, when did you start playing soccer? And, the funny thing is we didn't play soccer at all. I think the last year that I played soccer was third grade in, for a Catholic youth league team, a little co-ed Catholic youth league team. So that was about the last year I played soccer. But yeah, I was a running back growing up. I played corner and safety in high school. It was one of those things for me. I got into punting after Johnny. It was a little brother mentality, like I see him doing it. It's like, why can't I do it too? And it ended up being a pretty interesting path. But Johnny was the one that, led us down that road.
And so, Johnny, how did it happen for you?
We didn't want to be punters, like Tommy said. Like, we were athletes. And there were still, at that time, this was like early 2010s. That's 2008, 9, 10. There was still this stigma around punters that they weren't athletes. Right? Nowadays, it's kind of different to be a kicker in the NFL. I mean, you got to be 6'1" to 6'4", and you got to be jacked and athletic. And back then, that wasn't the case. So, I was a quarterback. Tommy was a running back and a safety. And, coincidentally, my freshman year of high school, the team needed a kicker. And I had never kicked a football in my life. So he just had a couple guys after practice kick a ball, and he was going to determine who was our guy from there. And I just happened to kick one that rolled further than the others. And so he was like, all right, you're our kicker. And I was like, all right. And from there, it became really cool to learn how to kick spirals and do all the different things that comes with the position. And then it turned into just getting college interest. And it just kept elevating our career from there.
Well, that's what's cool about it. It's such a niche that there's, obviously there's just not as, like, there's so many guys that sound like similar to your grandfather that are these multi-sport athletes or quarterback and, power forward and basketball and playing all these things. But to find someone that's really taken the technique side of kicking, there's a handful of great ones. It's not, widespread. So it seems like that's a cool niche in that way. So, all right. So you both go to the Gators. When you got there, I'm going to say Johnny first, were your NFL prospects immediately in your mind? Like, now you hit that goal of being on the Gators, like you committed to it, you went to it. When you got there, were you like, wait, I can actually take this to the next level, or did it take some time? Like, how did that feel?
I'd love to hear Tommy's answer on this, because I don't think we've ever talked about it too, because, I never had a point in my mind that I was going to play in the NFL until I got the call on draft day to get drafted. And, I was even fortunate enough to, have a successful career early on in my college career. I think my junior year, I was number one in the country and was a first team All-American. And there was already talk about me leaving early for the draft, ended up coming back for my senior year. But there was never a moment where I thought that was, going to be my path. I was just so focused on being the best I could be in my environment. And then it finally just came on draft day, and it was a very real moment.
And that's because we've had a few NFL players on the podcast. I don't know that I've ever heard anyone just not really like, draft day was like a 4-year vision for most of them. And it's like, oh, cool. Like, sounds good. Like, what were you thinking about doing after school if that call didn't come, or were you starting to bank on it? Like, did you have career plans that you were like, oh, I'll graduate and go do this? Or were you like, I want to know how that played in.
Sure. No, I was all in. Like, I lived and breathed football. It was the life. The goal was to make it to the NFL, but I just didn't know how realistic it was. It was just kind of a perspective thing. And I think that was really helpful to, get me to that point, is just, never being satisfied with my performance, or never, knowing how far the game would take me. So there was kind of this heightened sense of urgency to, be as accomplished as possible in the short term and never looking too far forward. And I think that's what helped kind of position me to, get drafted and have an NFL career.
Awesome. So Tommy, we both want to hear, how about you? Was it like you're going to go to the NFL from day one? Or?
Yeah, I mean, not necessarily. The reason I think that we have a little bit of a different perspective, and we saw ourselves, like in a different light, not necessarily being like that's what we want to do, that's what we're going to do. I think it's because that, we played different positions growing up. It's not like we were only punters, especially playing a bunch of different sports, like the goal could have been anything. I think for me, it was one of those things where it'd be great to play in the NFL or it'd be great to play in the MLB. You just don't really know, what the path to get there looks like or if it's realistic. So yeah, similar to like what Johnny said, it was not necessarily like a direct path or, expectation for us, but I knew I had a big leg and I knew that I could play in college, but obviously to play in the NFL, there's so many things that have to go right in order to even get to the NFL, to even get an opportunity to play in the NFL. But once I saw that, Johnny had gotten drafted and, he was playing, that made the expectation to play in the NFL a little bit more realistic and just kind of made me feel like I had to work, just that much harder to try and make that happen as well.
That was literally going to be my question. Seeing your older brother go, did that make you breathe a little easier? I could see it motivating you too, but did you also like take some of the pressure off or add pressure in that sense?
I wouldn't necessarily say either. It just kind of made me realize that playing in the NFL could be realistic, I guess, But there's definitely a little bit more pressure, my senior year to play well and to try and continue to put up big numbers. But I feel like the pressure really got put on when I went and I played in the East-West Shrine Bowl down in Tampa, which was the game, basically like a college all-star game, which players go and, we get eyes on us from, NFL scouts. But I had also gotten an invite to the NFL Combine. Johnny went to the Combine as well, and Johnny played in the Reese's Senior Bowl. So that's where most of the pressure really came on, and I guess most nervous I'd been for a kicking session was there on the field at the Combine.
Going to start with Johnny on this one too. You get the call. Raiders were where you went first, right? So you get the call from the Raiders. How was it stepping, into training camp, going out there first? Like, what was that feeling? Like, was it nerves? Was it excitement? Like, I'm sure it's a little both, but like, describe to me what that was to get that call, to go out there, et cetera.
Well, to be honest, I wasn't expecting to go to the Raiders. I didn't know they were even in the mix to draft a punter. So that was one of the crazy things about the draft day market too. Is it's such a crapshoot sometimes. There's so many moving parts and shuffling pieces that sometimes you'll go to a team that you didn't expect. I was expecting to go to like the Jaguars. They spoke to me on draft day, said they wanted to take me with one of their picks, and then got a call from John Gruden and the Oakland Raiders. But it gets really real when you get in that locker room, because for me, I got to be around some guys that I grew up watching. So right next to me was Derek Carr, quarterback of the Raiders, getting $1 million a week paychecks. And then just around the corner was Marshawn Lynch, who's just one of the most famous running backs in NFL history. And then when you get to meet these guys on a personal level, it's so surreal. Honestly, it really is. And so you almost have to come down to earth and remember that you have a job to do and you're a football player, and you're not just hanging out with people that you always admired. And but it's such a cool experience. And we did training camp in Napa, California. So I was a young kid just hanging out in Napa Valley doing wine tastings and eating at the best restaurants in the world, and then going to kick footballs in the afternoon. Yep. So it was really cool.
I didn't realize it did training camp out there at the time. That's awesome. That's a great place to hang out.
Yeah, we were right in the heart of Napa Valley, and all the wineries loved the Raiders, and so they'd invite us for tastings and dinners and give us VIP tours of all the caves and the vineyards, and it was really special.
Speaking of like having these, sort of your, some different heroes and stuff sitting next to you, do you get like a lot of like personal connection with these guys, or is it kind of like you go to work, you go to practice, you go to the game, and that's really the overlap you have with Carr and Lynch and all these guys? Or is there really like a social aspect to this that ends up happening?
It's a very different locker room dynamic going from the college to the NFL, because, when you get to the NFL, like you're just a young buck, you're a young head. Most of these guys have been in the league for, a handful of years to, some of these vets that have been around for 10 plus. So there's a big age gap when you first get in. And another thing is most of the guys are, either married and have families. So a lot of the guys, aren't really out doing a whole bunch of social things. There's certain groups of guys, it's kind of few and far between, of guys that'll you can just hit up on a random night to go out to dinner. But I mean, for the most part, everyone's really cool. I mean, there's a lot of good guys in the locker room, from locker room to locker room. So the social aspect, I guess, mostly happens in the locker room, but there's a few exceptions where, there's guys that you go out and do stuff with and hang out with and take trips with and all that.
Yeah, similar to frankly any other job. That's what's fun about it is like that's any career, any job you go to, any office you work in. Like, and there's also probably different personalities. There's probably some guys on the team that are like, I'm here to work and I'm out. Like, you're not my friends, you're my colleagues, you're my teammates. I'm going to do my thing. And then there's ones that are like, no, let's be a little more social. Let's go grab dinner. Let's go grab a drink. That's awesome. And so, Tommy, same thing for you. Like, going from college into the NFL, like, what was that feeling? What did you notice? Like, how was that experience?
It was pretty intense, just because, like I had mentioned earlier about me coming in during, in the middle of COVID. It was a very unique experience, and that's my rookie year during that COVID period was all I know in the NFL. So, I don't know how it is to come into a locker room, in a normal year and what it's like to interact with guys and like go do stuff, socially with guys, as a rookie. Just because, I didn't really have that opportunity. I was on lockdown. I was getting tested every single day. We had the little sensors that, we couldn't come within 6 feet of another player. And if we did, it would start blinking to let us know to get away. It was a very interesting experience, first coming in, and especially coming to a team like the Chiefs. And like Johnny had mentioned earlier about, the whole draft process is you don't really know where you're going. And I had gotten a call, a week before the draft. So teams will call around, the week before the draft for, somebody in my position that would have been like a late round draft pick, but probably going to go as an undrafted free agent. You get calls from coaches, scouts, just being like, hey, this is so-and-so from this team. Like, if you're available at the end of the draft, would you potentially be interested in, coming to this team as a free agent? And of course, it's always yes, like absolutely, like I would love it. And, I had gotten that call initially from Kansas City. And the entire time I was thinking, Kansas City's not interested. Like they wouldn't like actually have an opportunity for me to come in and like actually compete and play just because, they had a veteran there of, 15 years. And typically in that situation, it's, they want to bring somebody in as a camp leg, but that's not what you ideally a situation you want to come into, coming into the NFL. So when I had gotten the call from Kansas City after the draft, to come as a undrafted free agent, I was a little bit, like in shock that, that they wanted to bring me in and actually give me a real opportunity to come in and play. And, things panned out pretty well. And I worked really hard that off season, and the rest is kind of history there.
And how, to go to the Super Bowl your first year in the NFL, like, and I don't mean this in a negative way, but did you end up taking it for granted? Like, well, this is what happens. Like, it can't happen this way. Or was it like as ridiculous feeling and as shocking as it could? How did that feel to be like, who ended up here, like standing on the field during the beginning of that game and this sitting at the Super Bowl your first year out of college? How was that?
Right. It definitely, going back to like how I had mentioned, the thing about it being a COVID year. So typically for, the last 2 Super Bowls that we've been to, we've flown out to the, the location of the Super Bowl a week ahead of time to get a feel for everything, take care of media obligations, and just get used to the environment of being at the Super Bowl in general, practicing at a new facility and, just getting adjusted. Yeah. Interestingly enough, for the 2020 Super Bowl, we actually flew in the day before as if it was a typical away game. And so everything there was, really hard to process. And I guess I can't even say it was hard to process. I couldn't process it until the day of when we were, driving the bus into the stadium. And all of a sudden you see this big event and people flooding in and the banners everywhere, the signage, and you get out onto the field and, you're seeing the logos painted on the field. And it's just kind of like, holy crap, like we're at the Super Bowl,
Did you feel more pressure on it, or were you, because especially as a young player, like that's what they talk about in sports in general, like being young in that situation, it's hard to just treat it like another game, even though that's what you want to do. Like, how is that feeling? Were you able to just focus, treat it like another game, or was it?
I was definitely trying to. That was probably one of the most high pressure games that, I've played in. I mean, the Super Bowls are the pinnacle of American sports, and just kind of, the scenario of coming in, the day before a game and everything was kind of like, trying to like absorb and process everything the day of the game was kind of a lot. But I feel like that kind of like helped me see the game differently and be able to process it and come up with a different process just for, regular season games and postseason games.
And it also helped
that was
prepare you for the next 2 Super Bowls you got to play in. So you got plenty of practice.
Yeah. You walked away with a couple rings after that, but that was the Brady Gronk Super Bowl too, right?
Yeah.
It's okay to let them have that one more win.
Yeah.
Maybe Bill Belichick, who really was carrying the team, and call it a day. I went to college with Gronk. And then Johnny, so you went to Oakland and then you went like a different team every season, right?
Exactly. I'm the definition of an NFL journeyman. 5 teams in 5 years. So pretty crazy.
What's the thought process there? Because you're obviously talented, and I mean that sincerely. Like you've done well in the NFL. Like they're picking you up because they know more than anyone that you're talented. So in terms of the thought process, is it different people had different pieces and needed different things? Like how does that work that you end up like really moving around that much?
Sure. Well, the punter position, it's so bizarre because it's the only job in the world where there's a finite amount of them. There's 32 jobs in the entire world to be a punter in the NFL. Tommy had spoken on earlier, just to get into the NFL is a huge timing thing. There has to be, an open opportunity, a veteran player's not playing well or somebody gets hurt, and then maybe 1 or 2 spots opens a year. So after getting drafted to Oakland and they made the transition from Oakland to Vegas, the new general manager just cleaned house. So I had a whole new team going to Las Vegas. And so from there, I was just a veteran player with experience that was, filling those openings, right? So went to Baltimore for a little bit, went to Tennessee, was in Houston for a few weeks, went to Kansas City. I was kind of all over the place, just playing that role of a trusty veteran that could fill, a roster spot. So, and timing just, never unfolded to where one of those like true opportunities was available to, take a full season of a gig.
And so, and I'm going to get to this with Tommy too, but for you, like, what's next in that sense? Are you still keeping up and training and looking for that opening, or are you like, where's kind of your mindset on like what comes next now?
So we haven't talked in a while. I'm racing bobsleds for the U.S. team.
Oh, yeah, dude. One of my close friends got silver in women's. Way. Do you know? Have you met Lauren?
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes. At the Olympic Games.
I've known her. She was on this podcast. I've known her for 20 years.
Yeah. So, I mean, to not just throw a curveball in our conversation, completely kill the momentum. Yeah. So after last season, I actually blew my knee out on a blocked punt. I tore my LCL and meniscus. A guy like dove late and blew my knee out and ended up getting healthy kind of towards the end of the year-ish, and had an opportunity to join the U.S. bobsled team. So raced all over the country and this upcoming season all over the world. So pretty cool.
So you're going to go for, what is that, the 2026
in Milan. So yeah, cool running style.
Where is it?
Milan. Yeah.
Oh, that'll be dope. Awesome. Yeah, exactly. We at Jamaica make a bobsled team. By the way, I snowboard, as I think you guys know, nonstop, and I constantly quote Cool Runnings while I'm snowboarding, and it drives my wife nuts. So big fan. That's awesome. Sport. And it's a great sport.
Like I watched Cool Runnings before getting in a sled for the first time, and they make you think that you lean into the turns. You hold on for your life.
Yeah.
So after you run and jump in the sled, you basically have your head between your knees and you're holding on to these little pegs next to your ankles, and you're going 80, 90 miles an hour and pulling, as much G-force as an F-16 fighter pilot. And it's an unbelievable experience.
So is it really just as much of a push sprint as you can get going and then just be as aerodynamic as possible? Is that the skill there?
Exactly. And that's pretty much why I got into it, because, being a football player, all the training you do directly translates to pushing a sled. It's just, pushing as fast and as hard as you can, and then you just jump in and hold on. And they're actually pretty, cool machines. People don't realize it. It's not just a sled. They're completely carbon fiber, and they have this really like intricate system of like pulleys and levers and pedals, and they're pretty mechanical vehicles. So the pilot does the rest.
Again, I did not know that. So another question, did you have any inkling before this that was going to happen? Like, how'd you end up bobsledding?
I never expected to do it. I'd only seen snow a few times. My life being a Florida guy, but my third year in the NFL at the Baltimore Ravens, there was a player on the team named Sam Cook, and he was best friends, college roommates actually, with one of the directors of development at Team USA. So he was always recruiting NFL guys to, hey, when you transition from the game, we'd love for you to come work out with the team. Herschel Walker is one of the first guys that made it famous, transitioning from the NFL to bobsledding. So I was like, what the heck? I got a few months off. I'll go hang out at the Olympic Training Center and enjoy some nice chef cooked meals. And then it just turned into me making the team and raced all winter.
And so Tommy, in a similar note, you're coming off winning a Super Bowl. So I don't know if you're looking to change sports anytime soon, but I am curious. How do you think about the future? You've got 2 rings, you've hit that pinnacle, but that doesn't mean you've hit the pinnacle in one sense, but there's obviously people with more rings and you've got plenty of time. You did this young. how are you kind of thinking about the future of your career?
I was really thinking about either a transition to cricket or badminton. So,
I hear it's blown up.
but no, honestly, it's unknown for me right now. My plan right now is I'm just really selling out in, football. I want to do everything I can to, play as long as I can. The goal is 10 years, so I'm really hoping I can get to 10. And then, we'll see from there. I feel like there's so many different avenues that I could go down, whether it's staying in sports or, who knows what. So yeah, right now it's just kind of selling out at the craft right now and kind of figuring out the rest as it comes. I think it'd be nice to, take maybe a year or so off, once I'm done playing, and use that as a, bit of a transition period to reset and, see what my new passions are and, what I think would be a good career path to, carry out the rest of my, my working life.
I will say most of the people that think about a year off get to that point when they've worked like you guys have, their entire life, and they take a few weeks off and jump right into.
Yeah, everybody says they just get bored after like a couple weeks or like a month. It's like, okay, like I've played golf every day for the last 2 months. Like, what do I do now?
But yeah, Erik, you could probably relate to this. I mean, when you were building Hawk Media, I mean, you guys are now dominating the industry. There's this misconception that you have to be like diversified in your focus and you need to have work-life balance. You have to be all in. So, I mean, I would hope Tommy doesn't have any after football plans yet, right? Like, you should commit 100% of your focus to building what you want to build. And that's why you're the top 1% of the 1% in the NFL. And that's why, Erik, you're top 1% in your field.
No, I think that's actually exactly accurate. I think the idea of diversification, even, and I was going to actually ask this about like having side investments, side hustles, all this stuff, I actually think is all a fallacy. I think if you're not going deep and aggressively into one thing, that's where someone else is and they're going to beat you. And in every vocation, whether it's in athletics, it's obvious, but in business too, someone's out there that's working harder than you, that's waking up earlier than you, that's not taking their mind off, that in my case, like doesn't have a family yet, isn't worried about getting home to anything, and they are just grinding. And that's why when you have that opportunity, I think that's when you take advantage of it. And I'm honestly curious about that. Like, obviously the NFL pays well, we all know that, but like, how do you guys think about this as a business too? I've witnessed it a little bit when we were hanging out in Cannes and all that. How do you think about this as an opportunity above and beyond on the field, working out, performing, and how are you leveraging that?
Yeah, I mean, just through sports, I mean, there's so many different connections that you make. And even, the opportunity that came up to go to Cannes and meet you, probably may not have come up, if Johnny hadn't played and I hadn't, I wouldn't be here as well, So, I mean, there's just so many different opportunities and people that you meet throughout the process. And that's one of the really cool things. And something that I'm doing right now is I just enjoy talking to people about, like what they do and what their path was to get there. Because just like me and Johnny's path to being punters and to even, getting to Florida were very unconventional. That's just kind of what I'm doing right now, is just kind of like taking it easy and just kind of having genuine conversations with people and just hearing what their paths were. And that also gives me a little bit of peace, knowing that I don't have to have everything figured out right now. Makes me feel that I have, a little bit of time and kind of start piecing everything together and, figuring out a long-term plan once football's done.
Yeah, if there's one thing I've learned from this podcast, because it's these stories all the time, is nobody has it figured out ever. You're just figuring it out along the way, and everybody's trying to figure it out. And there's no point that you're just like, and I got it. Doesn't happen. So last question for both of you individually. We'll start with Tommy. For someone that wants to pursue their dream, whatever that might be, whether it's in the NFL or business or whatever, music, whatever it is, what's something you either did hear or wish you heard that really got you to commit and stick with it and get to where you are?
I think the big thing for me was, having role models like Johnny. And, even when Johnny was at college, playing for Florida and doing really well, I tried to reach out to, like other NFL guys, like Thomas Morstead, for example. He was always at the Colts kicking camps growing up. And that was, somebody in the NFL that, I kind of looked up to and tried to, mimic my game after. I remember one time in high school, he reached out to me over a DM on Twitter, and that was just like one of the coolest things for me. But the piece of advice I would give is to find somebody that you like what they're doing and they're successful at it, and they have a good plan and operation in what they do. Just try and follow what they do and follow their plan. And it's even better if you can find somebody in that position that can mentor you to get there. Like I said with Johnny and a little bit with Thomas, when he would reach out to me every now and again, and we'd speak every now and again. But just having mentors and somebody that you can look up to and go to for advice and just learn from.
Great advice, and I don't think comes up enough. And Johnny, how about you? Something that you didn't have Johnny, so what was your thoughts?
Yeah, I was going to say that's the cool thing about having a close relationship with somebody that's done it before you, is because you can just learn by every single one of their mistakes. Sure, I did a lot of things right in my career, but I think the failures are ultimately those teaching points that can provide Tommy with the true playbook on how to approach his career. And, the biggest thing for me is walking that fine line between staying humble and staying confident. Because as an athlete, you have to have an ego. You have to be confident in yourself, your abilities. On those days where your body doesn't necessarily feel good going into a game, you can still fake it till you make it and maintain that belief that you're just the best thing to ever happen. But then walk off the field and be humble. And, one of the biggest things that plays off of that is realizing the platform that you have while you have it too. Professional athletics comes with a lot of visibility. It comes with a lot of pressure. And I also believe it comes with the obligation to do something positive with the platform. So now, I've tried to lead a life of service off the field and support pediatric cancer patients with my professional athletics platform, and try to make the whole experience come full circle.
Love it, guys. Well, thank you for coming on Hawk Talk.
For sure. Yeah, I wanted to add one more thing on Johnny's comment about being confident. One of my favorite quotes is from Conor McGregor, and it goes, "At the end of the day, you've got to feel some way. So why not feel unbeatable? Why not feel untouchable? Why not feel like the best to ever do it?" So that's been my phone background for the past couple of years, and that's been a hard hitter for me on, like Johnny said, those days where you don't necessarily feel the best, but sometimes you just gotta say F it and just go out there and ball.
Say that quote again, and then we're going to say welcome to Hawk Talk, because that fired me up. Say it one more time. I got to hear it.
So at the end of the day, you've got to feel some way. So why not feel unbeatable? Why not feel untouchable? Why not feel like the best to ever do it? Welcome to Hawk Talk, baby.
And we got the commercial. Thank you, guys.
I love it.
Well, this has been awesome. Appreciate you guys, and I'll see you in France.